two-story one. I won't say which company I used to work for, but it had several departments, and each department had its own office. My department always did Secret Santa, and every year it was actually fun. That was true right up until 2015, when the person assigned to buy my gift turned out to be the new guy, the office creep, who I'll call Chryson. Of course, I didn't know it was him at the time. That was the whole point. We weren't supposed to find out until we took our gifts home, opened them, and then revealed who bought for who the next day at work. I had been assigned Margaret, an elderly woman who had worked there for years and loved bath bombs and similar stuff, so she was an easy person to shop for. I was a woman in my mid-20s, so I assumed I'd be easy to buy for too. My Secret Santa gift felt like a framed picture. I could feel the glass on one side when I lightly tapped it. It was wrapped badly, with a fragile sticker slapped on the front, so I made sure to be careful taking it home. When I got home, I had other things going on first, like breaking up with a guy I'd met on Tinder. He seemed fine at first, but quickly became way too clingy and obsessive. I forced myself to do the adult thing and break up with him over the phone instead of text, because I felt I at least owed him that. After that, I poured myself a glass of wine to calm down. By the time I remembered the Secret Santa gift, I was in this sad, floaty mood. I opened it carefully, and for a moment, I honestly thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Inside was a framed photo of a young, attractive couple standing on a beach. The man was wearing a Speedo that left almost nothing to the imagination. The woman was wearing one of those awful micro bikinis, neon pink, and it left even less to the imagination. You know the kind where the fabric is so thin it's almost see-through, so you're basically right on the edge of being naked. And sure, people can dress how they want. That wasn't the worst part. The horrifying part was that my face had been badly photoshopped onto the woman's neck. I'm very pale, with almost black hair, and this model was clearly a bronzed blonde. No effort had been made to match skin tones or anything else. I could even see some of her blonde hair sticking out behind my head. But somehow, that still wasn't the most disturbing part. The truly horrifying detail was that Chryson from work had been photoshopped onto the man's head. At first, I tried to tell myself it had to be a joke, maybe a cruel prank from one of the girls, since they liked to tease Chryson. That idea fell apart when I noticed a signature in the corner of the photo, written in Sharpie. It was his name. I told myself that could still be fake, but my stomach felt sick. Already upset from the breakup and the weirdness of the gift, I left the photo on my desk and decided I'd deal with it tomorrow, when we revealed who bought what. The next day was exactly as bad as you'd expect. During lunch, we all gathered for the reveal. I kept hoping stupidly that it wouldn't be him, but it was. Chryson had bought my gift. When he asked me if I liked it, his voice and face were completely sincere. I didn't know what to do. I know I should have reported him to HR or called him out right there. I should have shown the photo to everyone, but I felt deeply embarrassed. Chryson outranked me, and he was friends with the boss above him. He looked at me like an eager puppy waiting for praise, so I did the dumbest thing possible. I said it was sweet and thoughtful. When it came time to show our gifts, I pretended I'd forgotten mine at home and vaguely described it as a photo of me and Chryson. I know that was a stupid decision. Trust me, I know. You're probably yelling at your phone or screen right now about how idiotic that was, and you're right. But it was so strange and unexpected that my brain just shut down. That night, I took the photo apart. I didn't want to throw away the whole thing because the frame was actually very nice, and I figured I could reuse it for something that wasn't creepy. I half expected to find a message on the back of the photo, maybe a confession or some explanation. There was nothing. Just blank paper, so I tore the photoshopped image into pieces, especially destroying the bikini woman and making sure my face was completely separated and ripped into tiny scraps. I know, again, I was an idiot for not taking photos as evidence or keeping it. I wasn't thinking clearly. I shredded it, threw it in the trash, took the trash bag outside, and put it in the outdoor garbage can. I thought that if it was far away, I wouldn't have to think about it anymore, and for a few days I didn't. Then, a few days later at work, I was in the break room making coffee. I heard the door open behind me and casually said hey, assuming it was someone friendly from my department. I wasn't even worried it might be Chryson. He'd been acting completely normal since Secret Santa, and I'd started wondering if I'd misunderstood the whole thing. Then I felt his breath on my cheek. Before I could react, he spun me around and stared into my eyes. His face was red, angry, and glowing. "Why did you throw my gift in the trash?" he asked, his fingers digging painfully into my arm. That was the first time I ever truly felt afraid of a coworker. I stammered, not knowing how to explain something that should have been obvious. He squeezed my arm harder and demanded an answer again. That's when something snapped in me. I shoved him away into the small table and yelled that it was inappropriate, disgusting, and unwanted. Then I asked the question that chilled me. How did he even know I'd thrown it away? His answer was calm and simple. He said he suspected I might do that, so he'd been checking my garbage. I asked him why. Why the photo? Why me? Was he obsessed with me? Chryson acted offended, even disgusted, as if the idea of being attracted to me was insulting. He claimed I was the one sexualizing the image and that it was just a couple standing together. That's when I knew he was completely unhinged. Before I could react, he suddenly grabbed me and tried to force my face toward the hot stove I just used. He was yelling about ruining my beauty. I screamed, and thankfully, Greg, our department manager, burst in after smashing the door open. Chryson had locked it. Greg tackled him, knocked him out cold, and saved me. Chryson was fired despite his connections. I pressed charges, and security footage backed me up. He got a suspended sentence, but his life fell apart after that. I still work there, and we still do Secret Santa. We just warn new employees about the one guy who took it too far without naming me, of course, just in case anyone ever thinks that sending the most disturbing and unpleasant Secret Santa gift is the way to a fellow employee's heart. Spoiler, it isn't. Story 2 so, I'm a woman in my mid-20s. Usually, I live with my boyfriend, but he was away for work and was due to come back on Christmas Eve. This all happened a few days before Christmas Eve. I was relaxing in my warm single-story house, wearing my pajamas with Christmas decorations everywhere. I was really excited for my boyfriend to come home and see everything I'd set up. I don't remember exactly what I was doing when I first heard the noise. I was probably watching some random show on Netflix when I heard something that clearly sounded like footsteps on the roof. Now, hearing strange sounds in a house isn't that unusual. Houses make noises, especially when the temperature changes. Old ones creak, new ones shift, and there could always be squirrels or animals up in the roof space. Even a single-story house has one. I figured, whatever, as long as they didn't bother me, they could stay warm up there. Not long after, my friend called, and we started chatting and gossiping about random stuff. We talked about whatever show I was watching, and I'm pretty sure it was Asterisk 13 Reasons Why Asterisk, because I remember ranting so hard about it that she laughed and said I sounded like I was fighting people on Twitter. At some point, I casually mentioned the footsteps I'd heard earlier. She joked that maybe Santa was coming early and planning to slide his sack down my chimney. We laughed, talked a bit more, and then hung up. I went back to watching my awful show, trying to relax again. That's when I heard it a second time, clear footsteps on the roof. This time, it sounded like someone was pacing back and forth. Then it got worse. It sounded like running, almost in circles. That's when my stomach dropped. I wrapped myself in my winter coat and went outside to see if I could spot anything on the roof. Of course, I couldn't see much. I'm only 5'3", and the roof was hard to see from the ground. I would have needed to grab a ladder from the garage, and there was absolutely no way I was doing that in snowy weather, especially if there was some guy up there. I figured, what could someone really do from the roof anyway, so I went back inside. That was a huge mistake. Whoever was on the roof must have seen me, even though I hadn't seen him, and that seemed to set him off. Suddenly, he was running like a maniac up there, doing laps across my roof. I have no idea why, but it was terrifying. I was completely alone, and the noise didn't stop. He kept running for what felt like forever, at least half an hour. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to go outside again and look. This time, I saw him. He was wearing a filthy Santa suit and looked extremely thin, like a hardcore drug addict, and he saw me too. He pointed straight at me and started screaming that I was on the naughty list and that was why he'd been running around on my roof for hours. I stood there frozen, wondering how he even got up there. There was no ladder outside, and mine was still locked in the garage. The only thing I could think of was that he'd somehow jumped from a neighbor's roof. Either that, or he really was Santa. But if that were true, Santa was a dirty, skeletal meth head with bad teeth and a very strange workout routine. Luckily, my phone was in my coat pocket. I pulled it out and called the police right in front of him, keeping eye contact the whole time. I didn't even think about the fact that he could jump down at me or throw something. Honestly, with how cracked out he looked, I doubted he could hit anything if he tried. When I finished the call, I told him the cops were on their way. He paused, like he was thinking about it, and then just started running around the roof again. I watched in disbelief as he picked up speed, ran in circles, and then suddenly sprinted toward my neighbor's roof. He did a full front flip across the gap and actually landed it. Somehow he made it. I stood there watching as Meth Santa sprinted across rooftops like some kind of parkour expert. When the police arrived, I pointed them in the direction he'd gone, still feeling completely shocked. It's not every day you watch a doubt Santa doing rooftop stunts in your neighborhood. I went back inside and kept watching through the window. About 30 minutes later, I saw a police car drive past with Santa sitting in the back, looking miserable. Soon after, a kind female officer knocked on my door and explained everything. Apparently, he was a well-known local crack and meth addict. According to him, he was tired of being a bad person and wanted to become Santa. He couldn't afford presents, so his plan was to run around on roofs and make people believe Santa was real. In a strange way, it almost sounded sweet. That was until he admitted he'd been dropping small baggies, probably cocaine, down people's chimneys as gifts. I was very glad my house didn't have a chimney. When I asked how they finally caught him, the officer laughed. She said that despite his impressive jumps, his eyesight wasn't great. After one big leap, he ran straight into a chimney and knocked himself out. The police and fire department helped get him down, checked him with paramedics, and took him to the station. I have no idea what happened to him after that, or what kind of crime it is to drop drugs down chimneys as Christmas presents. I just hope he eventually got help. When my boyfriend came home, I told him the whole story. He didn't believe me for almost an hour, then decided it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. He was disappointed he didn't get to see Meth Santa himself. Even with all that, I still managed to have a great Christmas, and this year, I hope you all do too. Just remember, if you hear footsteps on the roof, it might be the jolly fat man, or it might be a crack addict. These days, you just never really know. Story 3, I really can't get my head around why someone would actively want to hurt and scare children in the way that some people do. I guess some people just have something broken or twisted in their mind. Maybe they carry pain from their own lives and decide to pass it on to others. I honestly don't know. I'm not a psychologist, even though sometimes I wish I understood how people like this think. What I really can't understand is how anyone could try to ruin Christmas, especially for kids who already have almost nothing. And that leads into what happened when I first started volunteering for Toys for Tots. A lot of people don't realize how many donated gifts we have to reject. Many are broken, don't work, or simply don't meet the rules for giving to children. Most of the time, it feels like people are just dumping unwanted junk so they can feel good about themselves. That's why most programs only accept brand new sealed toys. I've seen people online complain that we're ungrateful, but there are very real reasons for those rules. When I first started volunteering, though, this wasn't an official Toys for Tots program. It was a small, poorly planned effort put together by town officials, especially the mayor, who happened to be running for re-election the following year. Because of that, the whole thing was badly organized. We accepted unsealed, secondhand toys, and even worse, we allowed people to donate gifts that were already wrapped, Looking back, that was the biggest mistake we could have made. About a week before Christmas, I was carrying a stack of donated gifts into the storage room when I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my palm. I immediately realized something inside one of the boxes had stabbed me. I set the pile down and looked closer. A needle was poking through the corner of one box and had gone straight into my hand. My first panicked thought was that I'd just been stuck with a syringe and would need blood tests immediately. But right after that came the more disturbing question. Why would there be a syringe inside a child's Christmas gift? I carefully opened the wrapped box and my stomach dropped. Inside was a box filled with empty syringes, like insulin needles, all with their caps removed. Anyone tearing into that gift, especially a child, would almost certainly be stabbed. One of the needles had already pierced the box and injured me. I called my supervisors right away. They insisted I go to the hospital to get checked because there was no way to know if the needles were contaminated. I suspected they were clean and meant more to scare or hurt than infect, but I agreed to get medical help after we checked the rest of the gifts. To skip ahead briefly, I was fine. The syringes were clean and my guess was correct. After that, we unwrapped every single pre-wrapped donation. 4 more gifts had the same wrapping paper as the syringe box. It was a common design, so we hoped it was coincidence. Sadly, only one of those gifts was normal, a Bug's Life jigsaw puzzle. The rest were horrifying. The first was a copy of Shel Silverstein's Asterisk, The Giving Tree Asterisk. The beginning looked normal, but then it turned dark. Pages had been glued over with explicit adult images, some extremely graphic. Giving that to a child would either traumatize them or expose them to things no kid should ever see. Another gift was a doll that had been altered in ways I don't even want to describe. It was wrapped in a blanket and put back in its box so the damage wasn't obvious at first. The worst one was a large, expensive teddy bear. At first glance, it seemed perfectly fine. Then one of my coworkers noticed strange stitching along its back. We didn't open it ourselves. We called the police and handed everything over. Later, we were told the bear contained a medical blood bag filled with pig's blood. This happened years ago, before security, cameras, and safety checks were taken as seriously as they are now. We were devastated. What was supposed to be a kind act for local orphan children had been poisoned by what we hope was just one deeply disturbed person. We hadn't received many donations to begin with, and now the few gifts we had felt meaningless and sad. The person responsible was never identified or caught. Something so innocent and hopeful was completely destroyed. We suggested stricter rules for the following year, no pre-wrapped gifts and only new, sealed toys. In the end, the town decided the whole situation had gone too far and canceled the program entirely. Thankfully, other towns stepped up, and today Toys for Tots programs are far more organized and secure. So if you ever think these programs are too strict or demanding, remember this story. There are people in the world so twisted that their idea of fun is ruining Christmas for children who already live hard, painful lives. I just hope that those people face judgment in the next life, or better yet, one day karma will bite them in the butt in this life. Story 4. So many years ago now, I worked in a small craft store, and it was getting close to Christmas. That time of year was always busy but cheerful, and that year we did especially well. Because of that, we decided to have a potluck Christmas party, and the assistant manager, Janine, offered to host it at her house. Everything sounded perfect. About 4 weeks before the party, Janine started sending emails to all of us. She planned everything very carefully, maybe too carefully, making sure everyone knew what dish they were bringing so nothing overlapped and everything would be just right. One thing stood out in every single email she sent. Janine kept strongly reminding us that she had a severe peanut allergy, not just mild, but life-threatening. She made us promise again and again that none of our food would contain peanuts or even be contaminated by them. That wasn't an issue for any of us, since none of the dishes we planned involved peanuts anyway. When the big day arrived, the food spread looked amazing. The 8 of us sat around Janine's large dining table, talking happily about what a great year Carol's Crafts had had. Carol, the owner of the store, was already a bit drunk when she arrived in a cab, which was strange to see. It felt like watching your grandma tipsy. Janine's husband set up the table, laid out all the food, and then left the house, saying he was going out drinking with his friends. That left just the 8 of us, the full staff of Carol's Crafts. 7 women and 1 man, Bruce, who looked exactly like Freddie Mercury back then. He was dramatic, funny, openly bisexual, and always the life of the group. He had us all laughing hard as he told wild dating stories from his time living in New York. None of us noticed anything strange about the food on the table. I won't say what it was just yet, but there was something wrong that should have been obvious. We were too busy laughing, talking, and enjoying ourselves. We barely even started eating at first, but when we did, the food was incredible. Everyone was complimenting each other, and it felt like a perfect night. That is, until Janine suddenly started coughing. Then she began choking. Her face started swelling, and we immediately knew what was happening. She had somehow eaten peanuts. She clawed at the table, desperately reaching for water and trying to say EpiPen. But we had no idea where she kept it in her house. Then Carol suddenly jumped up, reached into her purse, and pulled out an EpiPen. Later, she claimed she always carried one because she was the boss and wanted to be prepared for Janine's allergy. Without hesitation, she injected Janine, and almost instantly Janine started breathing again and the swelling slowed. We still called 911, and an ambulance arrived quickly and took her to the hospital. That wasn't the end of it. The doctors later confirmed that Janine had eaten a full amount of peanuts, not just traces. The reaction was far too severe to be from cross-contamination. That meant one of the dishes she ate contained peanuts on purpose. After all the warnings, Janine felt it had to be an attempt on her life, and she contacted the police. They investigated and found that a meatloaf contained ground peanuts and not a small amount. It was clearly deliberate. That's when we realized something none of us had noticed during the party. There were supposed to be 8 dishes at the potluck, but there were 9. Every single one of us explained which dish we had brought, and none of us claimed the meatloaf. After Christmas break, we returned to work, and things were never the same. Janine kept making comments, hinting that she believed one of us had tried to kill her. Slowly, we all started suspecting each other. Was it Bruce, tired of Janine's strict rules and obsessive organizing? Was it Carol, who oddly had an EpiPen despite not needing one herself? Had she wanted to scare Janine without killing her? Or was it someone else entirely? We had all been close, almost like family, but now there was fear between us. Carol's Crafts became tense and uncomfortable. Every time it felt like we were moving on, someone would mention the peanut meatloaf, and everything would start again. This slowly broke Janine. She began openly talking to herself in the break room, calling us potential killers and saying her coworkers wanted her dead. Eventually, Carol asked Janine to leave the company, and honestly, we were relieved. We thought maybe that would finally end it. Then Carol called a meeting. She said the whole situation had weighed heavily on her. She announced she was retiring, selling off the stock, and closing Carol's Crafts for good. Being surrounded by suspicion and fear had destroyed the business. We never found out who tried to kill Janine, or at least not at the time. The truth came years later in a long, apologetic email Janine sent to all of us. She explained everything. The person responsible was not one of us. It was her husband, Paul. While we were drinking in the living room, he had prepared the table and secretly heated up a meatloaf he had made earlier. He had crushed dozens of peanuts into it, knowing it could kill her. His plan was to make it look like one of Janine's coworkers had done it. Janine found out later during one of their final explosive arguments when Paul let something slip about the meatloaf. There wasn't enough proof to charge him, but she included the attempted poisoning in their divorce. Paul was now her ex. I have no idea where any of them are now. Carol retired to Florida and later passed away during the pandemic, ironically after being hit by a bus and not from the virus. I wish them all well, but I'll say one thing for sure. There is no way I am ever attending a potluck Christmas dinner with any of them ever again. Story 5. I never particularly enjoyed the company of my neighbor Ronnie back in the day. I can't really say I hated him, but he was one of those overly cheerful, larger-than-life middle-aged divorcees who always wanted to stop me and talk about sports I didn't watch or teams I didn't care about. He was also the neighborhood gossip, which annoyed me even more. I honestly didn't care that Mrs. Henderson was allegedly having an affair with a pool boy, or that Lucy de la Roe was on antipsychotic medication. None of that was my business. The main problem with Ronnie was that since he lived right next door, he seemed to really enjoy my company, and he also made it his mission to be the life of every neighborhood gathering. That meant constant barbecues, safari suppers, and movie nights in the home theater he'd built in his basement. Okay, I'll admit, the theater part was kind of cool, but I usually had to force myself to attend the cookouts and social events. Being new to the neighborhood and freshly divorced myself, I didn't really have a good excuse to avoid Ronnie and his endless hospitality. So I came to see him as a necessary evil, an overly friendly, overwhelming presence I had to tolerate in order to live in the otherwise amazing, high-quality home my parents had left me when they retired to Arizona. And honestly, I still don't understand why anyone would choose to retire there of all places. Everything Ronnie did was just a little too loud and a little too much. He was always working on some home improvement project, starting way too early in the morning and ending far too late at night, making an unbelievable amount of noise in between. When he had family over, his grandkids were just as loud and just as irritating. He also had this shed where he worked on his projects, and it always gave me this strange feeling, like that song, "What's He Building in There?" There was no real mystery about it, though. Ronnie loved to brag and show off whatever he was working on. Picnic benches, refurbished recliners, reframed paintings he found at Goodwill, and more often than not, we, his lucky neighbors, ended up being gifted these half-finished, half-decent projects that he'd spent weeks making noise over. I know I sound like a complete jerk talking about Ronnie like this, and I probably am. Would it help if I told you that Ronnie is actually sitting right here as I write this, laughing and egging me on to make myself sound even worse? Because the truth is, Ronnie and I are best friends now, ride or die. I love him like a brother despite the 20-year age gap, and it all comes down to one Christmas a few years ago when he nearly drove me insane by playing Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time by Paul McCartney on repeat. Like I said, Ronnie did everything bigger and louder than anyone else, and that included Halloween and Christmas. Every October 1st, he went all out decorating his house for spooky season. Every December 1st, he did the same for Christmas. Lights everywhere, giant decorations, a Santa on the roof, the whole thing, and honestly, he did an incredible job. It became the highlight of the neighborhood every year. To give you some context, his decorations broke multiple HOA rules, and the HOA didn't say a single word. Do you know how beloved you have to be for that to happen? Yeah. So it was the night before Christmas, and the neighborhood was quiet, except for the animatronics on Ronnie's lawn and the flashing lights. By then, I'd learned to tolerate it. I bought a sleep mask and tried not to be the grumpy 27-year-old neighbor. What I couldn't tolerate was the fact that at exactly 11:18 p.m., Ronnie decided to blast Christmas music at what felt like an insane volume. Wonderful Christmas Time. Only that song, over and over. I heard it play 4 times. There hadn't been any music earlier, which was strange. Was he having a late night party? Even for Ronnie, this felt off. The song started a 5th time, louder, then a 6th time, louder still. By the 9th loop, my windows were rattling. I was furious. I was ready to march over there and yell at him, even on Christmas Eve. I noticed lights turning on in other houses too, shadowy figures peeking out toward Ronnie's place. As I pulled on my coat and boots, the song looped again, even louder. That was it. There was no backing out now. From my house, I couldn't see Ronnie's front porch, but the moment I stepped onto his lawn, I knew something was wrong. One of his light-up Santas had been smashed. His front door was wide open. For a second, I considered going back to grab my gun, but something told me I didn't have time. Instead, I grabbed an axe leaning against his firewood pile and went inside. The house was destroyed, furniture overturned, drawers ripped out, pictures torn off the walls and smashed on the floor like someone had been desperately searching for something. I followed the sound of Wonderful Christmas Time into the living room, and what I saw there is burned into my memory. Ronnie was lying in a pool of blood, slumped against the cabinet that held his old stereo system. His eyes drifted in and out of consciousness, and one bloody hand rested on the volume knob. His fingers were slick with blood. He'd been turning the volume up, trying to get someone's attention. His shirt collar was caught on the cabinet, barely holding him upright. It was immediately clear why he couldn't move. He'd been beaten almost to death. Both legs were broken, one so badly I could see bones sticking out. One arm was broken too. The other arm barely worked, just enough to twist the volume knob now and then. His face was swollen beyond recognition. Later I learned he'd been hit over and over with an aluminum bat. I started looking for a phone, but Ronnie began convulsing and frantically fiddling with the volume again. I followed his gaze upstairs, and when the music dipped for a moment, I heard it. Footsteps. I tried to find the landline again, but Ronnie grew frantic. He wanted me to leave. There was no way I was leaving him. I was still holding the axe. I didn't know where Ronnie kept his guns, and I still don't know why I acted so recklessly. But it was Christmas Eve, and my brain wasn't exactly working. I went upstairs. I saw the intruder right away. He was shorter than me, and I had at least 80 pounds on him. He was tearing pictures off the walls and opening cabinets, clearly searching for Ronnie's safe. I didn't think. I flipped the axe and charged, slamming the handle into the side of his head. I expected him to drop, but instead he turned, rage burning in his eyes behind a ski mask. He had a pistol. I swung again, not caring this time, but in my panic I hit him with the butt of the axe. He went down. I grabbed his gun, then rushed into Ronnie's office and used every USB and Ethernet cable I could find to tie him up. I don't remember much after that. I sat there with the gun trained on him until another neighbor shook me out of it. The intruder turned out to be Ronnie's estranged son, trying to rob him on Christmas Eve. Ronnie had money and valuables in his safe, and his son wanted it all. He nearly killed his own father for it. Ronnie says I saved his life, and after that, he wouldn't leave me alone even if I wanted him to. And the truth is, I didn't want him to. He's in a wheelchair now. His injuries changed him. His son is in prison. Ronnie can't run the neighborhood parties like he used to, so I help him, like a sidekick. He refused to move away despite everything. I'm glad he stayed. He's one of the best people I know. I still feel guilty for judging him so harshly back then, but he says my punishment is telling this story. Every Christmas since, I help Ronnie decorate along with my wife. My 2-year-old daughter calls him Uncle Ron Ron. Life is very different now. It was a terrifying, brutal night, but it gave me a friendship most people never find. And there's only one rule between us now. Never, ever listen to Wonderful Christmas Time again. Screw that song, but Merry Christmas. Story 6. So, I'm actually the son in the story, and it's something my dad told me many times when I was a kid. I'm going to write it from his perspective as he tells it to me, because honestly, it makes more sense hearing it the way he remembers it. I did ask him to write it himself, but he flat out refused, saying, I'm not writing all that crap for some Facebook Minecraft podcast nonsense. He's 65 now, and I have no idea how he even knows what those things are. He also cannot understand the idea that you are not Markiplier and that other YouTubers exist. So I'm writing this exactly as he dictates it. So anyway, hi Markiplier, or whoever you are, this happened a long time ago. Our family made the very stupid decision to get a real Christmas tree that year. Trust me, don't bother. They're messy, they're annoying, and apparently they can lead to things like what happened to us. We drove out to a national forest, me, my wife, and this little bastard who's writing all this down. And before you get upset, I love my son very much. I just like giving him a hard time. We were driving through the forest when I spotted it, the perfect tree. Out came the axe, and I started chopping like some kind of old school lumberjack. Paul Bunyan himself would have been proud, the way I was hacking and swinging at that trunk. And then suddenly, I heard this horrible sound, half scream, half shout, yelling, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Out of the trees came this big, heavy older couple, bundled up in winter clothes. The man was red in the face, either from the cold or from years of drinking too much. He waddled right up to me and jabbed a fat finger into my chest, telling me I was absolutely not allowed to cut down trees. I told him I was allowed and that this part of the forest legally permitted it. I even pulled out the paperwork to prove it. Not everyone knows that some national forests allow Christmas tree cutting, so I made sure I was prepared. The man took the papers, didn't even look at them, threw them into the snow, and stomped on them like a spoiled child. My wife saw red immediately. I'm usually the calm one, but she stormed over and started yelling at him, asking how dare he touch her husband and accuse us of crimes. He started stuttering, and she only got louder, shouting about him, spraying spit in her face and calling him every insult you could imagine. That's when I realized something was wrong. I looked around for my son, and he was gone. And so was the man's wife. I scanned the trees, and there they were in the distance. That round, egg-shaped woman was waddling away through the snow, holding my son's hand and dragging him along. I don't know what she told him to make him go with her, but he wasn't fighting her. The husband noticed I'd seen them and tried to block my view. I didn't think. I punched him as hard as I could. He flew backward, hit a tree, and dropped. I knew I'd probably be in trouble, but in my mind, this was a kidnapping, and all bets were off. I took off running after the woman and my son. The snow was deep, and somehow she moved faster than you'd expect, but not faster than me. I grabbed my son by the back of his coat, yanked him free, and tossed him behind me into the snow. Then I tackled that woman with everything I had. We went down hard, and her face slammed into a tree. She went out cold. I dragged her back to where my wife had managed to tie the husband to a tree using the straps we bought to secure the Christmas tree to the car. The woman was unconscious. The man kept muttering that we had it all wrong, that they just wanted to protect the forest. Right. A forest where tree cutting was legal. That didn't explain his wife trying to steal my kid. This was before cell phones, so my wife and son drove to the nearest store to call the police while I stayed behind. We didn't have anything to restrain the woman, so I sat on her to keep her down, which was unpleasant in every way. Thankfully, she didn't wake up. Eventually, the cops arrived and loaded the couple into their car. I'm still amazed they fit. In the end, nothing really came of it, their word against ours. The police agreed to ignore the multiple assaults as long as everyone accepted it was a misunderstanding. We didn't have much choice. I wasn't about to go to prison and leave my son without a father. Sometimes I worry that couple had done this before and maybe did it again. There's a lot of evil in the world, and only so much regular people can stop. Hope you enjoyed the story, Markiplier, and maybe you'll rate it on your radio show or whatever you weirdos do. Thanks for listening, and remember, don't be afraid to tackle a fat woman if she's kidnapping your son. Dad out, and that's my dad's story. I only vaguely remember it, but enough to know he's mostly telling the truth. I do remember the woman promising to take me to see Santa, and I guess I fell for it. I try not to think about that part. The idea that I was that dumb as a kid is almost harder to deal with than knowing I was nearly kidnapped and probably eaten, or whatever they planned to do to me. Story 7, is anyone here old enough to have been a dad in the mid-90s? Well, I am, and during those years, when my 3 kids were still under 18, 2 daughters and 1 son, I went through a lot. I'm still incredibly proud of them to this day, but I'm not here to brag about my kids. This story takes place in 1996. My son was 5 years old, and that Christmas, he wanted the one toy that every single kid seemed to want, a talking 12-inch Buzz Lightyear doll. If you were a parent back then, or even a kid, you'll remember how unbelievably hard those things were to find. It almost felt cruel that the movie Asterisk Jingle All the Way Asterisk came out around the same time, basically mocking parents who were desperately trying to track down one impossible action figure. But anyway, my story didn't involve Sinbad or dressing up in a Buzz Lightyear suit. Instead, I turned to the classifieds. It couldn't hurt to look right. People find all kinds of strange and unexpected things there. So I checked the listings, and sure enough, there were a few Buzz Lightyear dolls for sale. The problem was the prices. One was around $100, another close to $180. For context, that toy retailed for about $25. There was no way I could justify spending that much on one gift for one child when I had 3 kids. If I did, it would have been the only present he got, and that would have been just as disappointing as not getting it at all. After visiting store after store for days after work, I finally accepted that I probably wouldn't get that Buzz Lightyear. And then, one morning, I saw it. A tiny listing in the classifieds, Buzz Lightyear doll, $40. I assumed it was already gone, but I called anyway. To my surprise, a sweet old woman answered and told me she still had it. I immediately agreed to pay the full $40, not wanting to risk losing it. She explained that she'd bought the toy by mistake for her grandson after hearing on TV that it was the hottest gift of the year. Her daughter later told her it was really for younger kids, and her grandson was already 12. She planned to return it, but her daughter and son-in-law convinced her to list it for $100. She didn't feel right taking advantage of desperate parents, so she lowered the price to $40. She sounded genuinely kind, and when she said I'd have to come to her house to pick it up because she didn't drive, I didn't hesitate. Normally you'd meet in public, but there was nothing suspicious about her at all. Just to be clear, this isn't a story about an evil old woman luring me in to kill me for Christmas dinner. She really was lovely. I drove about 20 minutes to her home and stepped inside. It was exactly what you'd imagine: family photos on the walls, pictures of a man who was clearly her late husband, and a worn old chair that looked like it had been his favorite spot. She offered me a drink and then brought out the Buzz Lightyear. It was perfect, still in a Sears bag. That was probably how she managed to find it in the first place. We talked for a while, but I could tell she was getting tired. It was close to 8, and older folks tend to turn in early. I double-checked that she was truly okay with the $40 and even offered $50, which was honestly pushing my budget. She refused and even tried to lower the price to $30. I insisted on $40, knowing that extra $10 could help her during the holidays. We said our goodbyes, and I promised to keep in touch, maybe even add her to our Christmas card list. I also planned to have my son write her a thank you note. I walked down the steps and headed toward my car. That's when they showed up. 3 young figures stepped out of the dark, faces covered with balaclavas, bundled in thick coats. From their voices, I could tell they were young, maybe mid-teens, but that didn't make them any less terrifying. They shoved me, grabbed at the bag, asking what I had. Was it valuable? Was it worth my life? I tried to reason with them. I told them it was a Buzz Lightyear toy for my 5-year-old son, and how hard I'd worked to get it. I expected some trace of empathy. Instead, they laughed. They circled me, tugging at the bag, mocking me. I thought about fighting back. I wasn't weak back then, and I probably could have hurt them, but the fear of seriously injuring a teenager right before Christmas stopped me. They rushed me all at once, and suddenly I felt a cold, strange sensation in my side. At first, I didn't understand what had happened. My grip loosened, and the Sears bag fell. One of them grabbed the doll, and then all 3 froze. I saw something like fear flash in their eyes. Who did that? One of them asked. The others shook their heads. Then they ran. Only then did the pain hit. A burning, horrible pain in my side. I touched it and felt warmth even through my gloves. One of those kids had stabbed me. I'd been stabbed over a Buzz Lightyear doll. I collapsed on the sidewalk, weakly calling for help. Thankfully, someone nearby heard me. Paramedics arrived and rushed me to the hospital. The knife hadn't gone deep thanks to my winter coat. It missed anything vital, leaving me with stitches and a few painful days. Insurance covered most of it, thankfully, so it didn't ruin Christmas financially. Then came the hardest part, explaining it to my son. We decided to tell him the truth. A few days before Christmas, we sat him down and explained why Daddy was hurt and why he wouldn't be getting the Buzz Lightyear. I expected tears or anger. Instead, he was calm. He said he understood and that he'd be happy with other gifts. That broke my heart more than the knife ever did. That Christmas came and went. No Buzz Lightyear, but we were together, and that mattered. A week after New Year's, I saw one sitting alone on a store shelf. The craze had finally died down. I bought it immediately and gave my son his talking Buzz Lightyear. After that year, I pushed video games hard for birthdays and holidays. But I'll never forget the Christmas when a plastic spaceman nearly got me killed. Be careful out there, folks, even 30 years later. Story 8, Hey Joel and Crew. Do any of you remember that massive, terrifying blizzard that hit Oklahoma back in 2009? I do, because I got trapped right in the middle of it. I was driving home from a remote Christmas party on Christmas Eve when the snow suddenly started coming down hard. Whatever signal I could get on the radio kept repeating the same warning over and over, telling everyone to stay indoors and absolutely not drive anywhere, which was great advice, except I was already halfway home when they decided to say it. Before long, the snowfall became so heavy that driving felt suicidal. I tried to pull over onto what looked like a safe snowbank on the side of the road, but it turned out to be a deep drift. My car slid sideways and dropped straight into a ditch. Within seconds, snow was piling up so fast it felt like the world was trying to bury me alive. That storm ended up dumping a record 14 inches of snow. Try imagining being stuck in that, alone. There was no chance of flooring the gas or rocking the car free. It was completely stuck at an angle, frozen in place, of course. There was no cell service either. Middle of nowhere, blizzard raging, Christmas Eve. I honestly believed I was going to die in that car. I thought about my boyfriend waiting at home, the quiet night we'd planned together, and I just broke down crying. He was a paramedic and hadn't come to the party because he didn't want to miss a Christmas Eve shift. And now, instead of seeing him on Christmas morning, I was freezing to death in a ditch. My teeth started chattering uncontrollably. I grabbed every blanket, jacket, and scrap of fabric I could find and wrapped myself up like a cocoon. I only turned the heater on in short bursts, terrified of draining the battery too soon. Each time the heat came on, it melted the snow on the windows just enough to let in a dim gray light. Time stopped meaning anything. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. I drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point, I woke up shaking so violently I thought I might bite my own tongue. I ran the engine again, longer this time, letting the heat blast until the windows cleared a bit. And that's when I saw something outside. Someone was moving through the snow. They were wrapped in deer skins, hunched low, stalking through the trees like an animal. I know it sounds impossible, but it didn't feel like a dream. Dreams feel fuzzy. This felt real. The figure clearly noticed my car but pretended not to. Panic took over. I banged on the window and screamed for help, but I was too scared to open the door or roll the window down. If snow rushed in, it could bury me completely. Slowly, the deer-clad figure approached the window. They tapped on the glass once. Then they ran off into the storm. All I remember clearly is a dirty, human face under those skins. Even now, I can't explain it. This wasn't some frozen wilderness in another country. This was Oklahoma. I convinced myself I was hallucinating from the heat and shut the engine off, but then I started feeling too warm. I began pulling blankets away, sweating and uncomfortable. Somewhere deep in my mind, I remembered that this was a bad sign. People with hypothermia often feel overheated right before things get worse. My thoughts became slow and heavy. I started slipping away, and then I saw angels. A glowing, golden choir moving silently through the snow toward me. Except they weren't angels at all. They were headlights. A rescue truck cutting through the blizzard. They were there to save me. I won't go into the long, exhausting process of pulling me from the car, wrapping me in thermal blankets, and rushing me to the hospital. I had severe hypothermia. That's how I spent Christmas Day that year, in a hospital bed, being pumped full of fluids and monitored to make sure my body didn't shut down. My boyfriend never left my side. He brought my presents to the hospital, and somehow it ended up being one of the best Christmases of my life. Because the night before, I was absolutely certain I was dead, and waking up alive is the best gift you can get. Hi friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Time, and there are super fun live streams on Sundays and Wednesday nights. If you've got a story, be sure to submit it to my email at afuture@gmail.com. Mailto afuture@gmail.com. You might even hear your story featured in the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon. Or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks for members of the channel. And check out the Eerie Hour, where you can hear all of these stories and big compilations anywhere you listen to podcasts. I also have a true crime channel called Saturn Soul. All links are down in the description below. Thanks so much, friends, and remember, are you really going to treat me like this when Santu is literally on his way to town?